Hey, welcome to week 5. This week we're focusing on variables and arithmetic math. In this chapter, just going by the chapter outcomes, you're going to need to be able to declare variables, be able to copy one variable, the contents of one variable into the contents of another variable, do some calculations. We're going to go over some of the incremental operators, which are they're like shortcuts when it comes to adding and subtracting, multiplying, dividing, things like that, and some of the constants that are inside the special JavaScript math library. Okay, so to start out, I have my my program here. Oops. All right. So I have my program outline that I use to start to kind of give me a jumping off point. So what I'm going to do here is create a program that can figure out the area of a square, or sorry, of a circle. Area of a circle, the formula is pi times radius squared. Okay, in so doing, we will go over a lot of these concepts. All right, so I have my HTML. This is pretty much the same for just about all of our programs from this point out. Inside the head, I do have my script section. Inside my script section, I have my function. Just as a placeholder, I have a message with an input field, a button to actually start the program, the function, and then some place to put my answer. Okay, our output div. So in order to figure out what the area of a circle is, first we need the user to input the radius. So my message, instead of type something here, which is very generic, will say enter in the radius. Okay, right here. And I'm going to give the idea of this text box something a little bit more descriptive than just something. I'm going to call it radius, like that. And then on our button, which is inside between the two button tags, I'm going to say calculate area. And output div, I'll just leave it as the same, and I'm going to change the name of the function to calculate radius. Oops, if I can't spell. Radius. All right. This has to match exactly the function name, so I just copy and paste it from one spot to the other. So there's no chance of accidentally mistyping. We have our defining table. So let's say our input is the radius of a circle. Calculate the area. This is under processing. Using pi times radius. I'm just going to use this as a shortcut for square, but just so you know, this is not how you do it in JavaScript. We'll show you how to do that in a second. This is just how we, it's kind of a shorthand when you don't have the ability in a text editor to raise that 2 to the square. So radius squared. And then output will be the area of a circle. Okay. So now we kind of have an idea of what we need. Need the radius. We know the formula. We'll throw that in our processing, then what we're trying to output. Right here, we have our input, and then everything we just set up. So the first thing you need to do is create a variable that holds the radius that the user has input. So in order to declare a variable, you use a special word called var. That means this is a variable. It goes out into the computer memory, say, I'm going to create a little spot in the computer memory, and I'll put put my hand up here. A little spot in the computer memory, and I'm going to hold some information in there. And I'm going to give that little spot in computer memory a name so that I know how to reference it later. So I'm going to call it R for radius. I'm going to set it equal to, and we remember from our last week how to grab the value from a input field. That's using document.get element by ID. And then inside the quotes, you put the ID, just like that, dot value. Okay. Now this grabs whatever's in the text box and puts it inside the variable called R. Now, this is always a string, so it's always characters. So even if the user is putting in numbers, it looks at them as if they are the character of the number, not a number as in something you can do math with. And so there's one extra step that you have to do. So rather than calling this R, I'm going to call this radius, and then I'm going to create a new variable called R, and this will hold the number value of the radius that the user has put in instead of the string value. And you do that by a special function called parse float. And this says I'm going to take a string of a number and I'm going to turn it into a real number that we can actually do math with. So radius, like that. So whatever string value is inside of radius, it's going to try to turn that into a float. Now, float is a number in computers that has a decimal. There's a couple different kind of numbers. There's integers, which are whole numbers, and there's floats, which are decimals. If you're expecting a whole number, you can use parse int. So an integer means integral. It means it's a whole number. Float means it's a floating point or has a decimal area, a decimal value as part of the number. Okay. In this case, a radius could have decimals, and so we want parse float. And except for a couple special cases, you'll probably be using parse float for the most part in this class. Okay. So now we have a variable called R. It's a little spot in memory that holds a number, and we're going to call it R every time we reference it. Okay, now we're going to create another variable called area. And area is going to contain the area of the circle after we do all the math on R. Okay, so area, we're going to say is pi. I'm just going to type it out, pi times R squared. Okay, so that is the formula, but we need to turn it into the kind of things that JavaScript understands. So pi is a special constant that's inside a library inside of JavaScript, and it's in the math library. Okay, so if you type math, capital M, and hit dot, you'll have a whole bunch of different kind of constant numbers that are just kind of sitting there ready for you to use, or functions, and one of them is pi. So when you type this into your program, inside the JavaScript library, it knows that pi is 3.141592 blah 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 blah. Okay, however number of decimal places that the library holds, but it holds that value. So this, you can look at this as the exact same thing as having the number of pi. So it could be 3.1415927. So it would work like this, or it works the same way to do pi. You just don't have to actually know the number, which is kind of handy. Okay, the asterisk is multiply in computers. We have the R, okay, which is our radius, which we are holding in inside this variable up here. Now we need to be able to take that r and square it. So we know that r squared is the same as saying r times r. Okay? So this is pi times r, or pi r squared. There's another way you can do it using that same math library. Math dot, sorry, I was trying to remember. Okay, POW. So this says math times POW, which stands for power. So you take r, comma, 2. So this basically says take r and take it to the second power. If we want to take it to the third power, if you want to cube it, you change that to 3. If you want to take it to the fourth power, you change that to 4. This is always the base. This is always the power after the comma. So this is a special math formula. So you don't have to do pi times, or r times r times r times r. You can just do this instead. Okay, in this case, we only need 2 r's. And so it'd be r to the second power. So I'm going to go ahead and use the math.pow because it's a good way to do it. Okay, so now we have pi times r to the second power. Okay, order of operations says, okay, we take the power first, and then we do our multiplication. So this is pi times r squared. Now, once we get this calculation, then we save it inside this variable called area. So now, anytime we call area, we have the area of the circle according to the radius that the user puts in. Now, finally, we just need to put the answer inside this output div tag. So we do that in a similar way. Document dot get element by ID output div, and divs have inner HTMLs instead of values. So inner HTML is equal to area. Okay, so whatever's sitting inside this place of memory that we call area will be put inside the HTML of this div tag. Okay, so we'll save it. Then we'll try it out. Enter the radius. We'll have a radius of 4. Calculate it. And so 50 times da 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 da. So we can check our work. Grab the calculator. So if the radius is 4 times 4 is equal to 16, multiplied by 3.1416, let's say, how much? 50.265. So that is, they have a bigger pi inside that math.pi library. So that's why we get decimal places, but that is correct. Okay. Now, a couple additional things to help you out here. There is a couple new operators called the incremental operators. So if you have a variable, we'll call it a, and it's equal to 1, then we can do a plus plus. And what that does is it says, okay, take whatever's in a, add 1 to it, and then save it back into a. So if we were to then see what was inside a, this, okay, so I'm just kind of repurposing the same program here. So we have a variable that holds a, We're going to increment it by 1, save it inside the variable called a, and then see the result. I'm going to save it. When we look in here, refresh, it's 2 because we took a, which was equal to 1, incremented by 1, which makes it 2, and then output it to the output div. Now there's another way to do it, and that's to put the plus in front of the a. So if we save that and look at what happens when we hit the button, it still says 2, right? Now there's a big difference with this and this. This says go ahead and increment it by 1 and then do any remaining math in your equation. Where this says do all the math and then increment it by 1. So say you have a is equal to 1, and you say var b is equal to a plus plus times 4. This says, okay, a times 4, which would be 4, and then increment a by 1. And so when you, I'm trying to think of the best way to show this, but we'll do this. A is equal to this output div. Actually, I'll do it like this. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants here. Okay, we'll have an output message, right? Bar message is equal to A equal to A. Remember how we concatenate. B is equal to B. So I created a string that tells us what A is and then what B is, okay? And then we'll output the message. Like that. Hit save. All right. So now when we come in here, just so we know what's going on, I'm going to make A2 just to make it a little bit more visible here. So A starts with the value of 2. Then when it does 2 times 4, that would be 8. And then it'll increment A from 2 to 3. So in the end, A will be equal to 3 and B will equal to 8. Okay, hit save, hit refresh, and then A is equal to 3, B is equal to 8. Now, let's say we put the plus in front of the A. Now it's going to increment the A first to 3 and then multiply. So A in the end will still equal 3, but it's going to do the increment first before it does the multiplying by 4. So 4 will be times 3 and not times 2, which would be, so B would equal to 12. So we'll hit save, refresh, okay. So now B is equal to 12. So that is the difference between having the increment before versus after, is whether it does the increment before it does the rest of the math or after it does the rest of the math. All right. One last thing I wanted to show everybody is the operators. So what you can also do is plus equals 3. Okay. What did I do wrong here? Let's go look at maybe my syntax is wrong. Let's find it. Sorry about this. I don't know why it's not. That's what it should be. Oh, I know why, because I have the var in there. A is already declared. All right, sorry about that. So now we have a variable called a, and then what we want to do is do a plus equals 3. So we're going to take whatever's already in a, which is the value of 2, add 3 to it, so it would be 5, and then the new a value of a would be 5. So it takes whatever's already in a, adds something to it, and then that's the new value of a. You can also do minus equals. So it works the same way, except you're subtracting the new numbers. So if you have a 2 and you take whatever is already in there, which is 2, and subtract 3 from it, you get -1, and so the new value of a would be -1. Multiply equals, they all work. Times equals, so it takes whatever's already in there, 2, multiplies by 3, so you have 6, and the new value of a is now 6. And then divide equals, same deal. The new value of a is 2 divided by 3. Okay, so those are pretty easy. One last operator that you probably have never seen before, but we use it every once in a while in computer science, and especially in this class, is something called the percent, the modulus. So the modulus is kind of like a division, except it doesn't give you what the number is divided by. Oops, bar b is equal to. It gives you the remainder. So when you divide, if it doesn't go into it as a whole number, you have a remainder. Okay, so way back in elementary school when you were first learning division and they didn't want you to get into the decimal part of division, they would tell you to say, okay, 3 divided by 2, 2 doesn't go into it evenly, so it goes into it one time, and you have a remainder of 1. All right, so what this modulus does is go ahead and divide the two numbers and just give me the remainder portion. Don't give me the how many times it divides into, just the remainder. So if you look at 2 modulus 3, the answer is 1, because when you divide 2 divided by 3, 2 goes into 3 one time. Maybe that's backwards, sorry. 3 divided. 2 goes into 3 one time, and you have 1 left over, and that's your modulus. Okay, so if you have 5 modulus 2, so 2 goes into 5, 2, 4 twice, and you have 1 left over. And so the modulus would be 1. When you have 5 modulus 3, 3, it only goes into 5 once, and you have 2 left over. So 5 modulus 3 is 2, because that's the number that's left over. Okay, so that's modulus. You can see it in up here in your list of operators right here. Okay. So something else that's also important in this to understand now, because we're going to use it quite a bit in the future, is your order of operations. So when you have a great big string of math things to do, you do them in a certain order. And they each have their order of precedence. So the first thing you do is you do everything that's inside a parenthesis first. Negation, which, making it negative instead of positive. After that, you do all your multiplies, divisions, and modulus if you have them. Then you do your addition and subtraction, and then you assign the answer of your equation to your variable at that point. Okay. So your order of operations, if just looking at this example, it'll be easier just to look at these. You have this variable in math notation where you have 1 plus a over n, you multiply that by I, and you multiply that by y over n. Okay, order of operations say first you do everything that's inside the parentheses. Okay, so you have to do the 1 plus a over n. Well, out of these things, what comes first, addition or division? If you look up here, division comes first. So first you figure out what a over n is, and then you add 1 to that. Once you figure out everything that's inside the parenthesis, you do your multiplications. Now you have a multiplication here, and you have a division here. These are all on the same line, so you just start left to right. 1 a, or I times whatever your answer right here is, times y divided by n. Okay, so you just do them left to right at that point. So when you turn it into JavaScript, it looks like this. You have your parentheses, just like here. You have I times parenthesis 1 plus a over n times y over n. So that's how you translate that notation into something that only happens in one line that JavaScript can understand. So looking at this, we have 7 over 2 times r plus 13 minus 3 times a plus bc. So when you were to calculate this, you do your parentheses first, so r plus 13, and then your a plus bc, or b times b plus b times, sorry, a plus b times c. So you have to do b times c, and then you add a to that. And then you do your multiplication, your division, you do this multiplication, and then finally, last of all, you do your subtraction. So in this case, it'd be var x is equal to 7 divided by 2 times r plus 13 minus 3 times a plus b times c, like that. Now you have to remember, in regular math, two numbers, a number next to a variable or parenthesis implies multiplication, but in JavaScript you have to actually explicitly tell it, I'm multiplying here. You can't just do 3 right here. It doesn't know what to do with that. You have to do 3 times. Okay, so just looking at this, if I were to do this, so this, you need to make sure all happens underneath the division. So we'll need to throw an extra parenthesis around this portion. Oops. And you need to make sure all of this happens. Will it need it? Let's see. So if I do this, I do this, and then I multiply that, divide by 7. Yeah, so this is the only thing that needs to be encapsulated in parentheses to make sure it all happens together. So if we check it, we're good. If we didn't have these parentheses, what would it look like? Well, you do r plus 13, and you do this part, and then you do 7 divided by 2, and then multiply that answer by r plus 13. That's not what you want. You want to multiply, take all of this. 7 is divided by everything underneath the division bar here. And so you need to make sure that all of this happens first. And by doing that, you throw an extra set of parentheses around it. When it's written like this, it's easy to see. You don't need the extra parentheses because all is sitting underneath the bar. But when it's written sideways, you have to make sure that this happens all together before the division happens. And so for that reason, you have to put the extra set of parentheses around it, just like that. Because if you didn't have the parentheses, what happens? You get a big old red X. That's not what you want. So it does matter that these things happen all together, or else your math is going to come out all wrong. I hope that helps you get started for week 5. Yeah, we're in week 5. If you have any questions, put them on the discussion board. Put a, if you don't get your answers there, you can go ahead and email me. put in the questions and comments discussion board, and I'll help you as every way I can. So we'll call that good.